Picture this. The year is 51 of the Common Era. You are standing on a hill fort in what is now northern England. Behind you, smoke rises from 30 villages that no longer exist. In front of you, 5,000 Roman soldiers form lines that stretch to the horizon. Your name is Cartimandua. You are 12 years old. You are the eldest daughter of Venusius, war chief of the Brigantes tribe. Yesterday, you were learning to weave. Today, you are watching your father negotiate surrender. This is what happened next, and why Roman historians spent 2,000 years making sure you never heard her name. Before we go deeper into what the Roman military machine did to royal daughters during conquest, I need you to understand something. This is not mythology. This is not legend passed down through generations. This is documented in Roman military correspondence, archaeological evidence, and the testimony of survivors that Roman chroniclers recorded because they thought it was policy worth documenting. If you believe that the documented records of history's most terrifying empires must be remembered, consider liking this video and subscribing. Your support helps unearth more accounts from the darkest corners of the human story. Let me take you back to who Cartimandua was before the Romans arrived. Born in 63 Common Era to Venusius and his wife Aeliana, Cartimandua was not just any child. As the eldest daughter of a Celtic war chief, she represented the future of her tribe. Celtic culture was matrilineal. Daughters carried royal bloodlines. Control a royal daughter, control the legitimacy of the next generation. Roman military strategists understood this perfectly. Cartimandua was described by the Roman historian Tacitus as exceptionally intelligent. Even by Roman standards, she spoke 3 languages by age 10. Celtic Brythonic, Latin taught by a captured Roman trader, and enough Gaulish to negotiate with neighboring tribes. She was being trained in tribal law, herbal medicine, and the sacred traditions that would make her a queen mother one day. She had 2 younger brothers, ages 9 and 7, and a younger sister, age 4. Her mother, Aeliana, was pregnant with their 5th child. Celtic royal children did not grow up isolated. Cartimandua knew every family in her village. She played with children of farmers and warriors. She helped her mother treat wounded soldiers. She was loved. She was protected. She had a future. Think about what that means. A 12-year-old girl with an entire community built around keeping her safe. Now picture what happens when that protection is systematically dismantled. The siege of the Brigantes hill fort lasted 3 days, but the psychological warfare had been ongoing for months. Let me show you how the machine worked. Act 1 of the machine. The demonstration of inevitability. Summer 51 in the year of our Lord. Roman forces under Publius Ostorius Scapula had been conquering southern Britain for 8 years. The strategy was not to fight every tribe. That would take decades and cost too many Roman lives. The strategy was to make resistance psychologically impossible. Here is what the Romans did 6 months before they reached Cartimandua's village. They conquered the Decingli tribe to the south, a standard military victory. But here is where it gets calculated. Roman commanders would spare the warriors who surrendered. Then they would gather all royal children, daughters specifically, ages 8 to 16. These children would be taken to the Roman camp. What happened over the next weeks was documented by Roman military scribes as integration processing. Surviving Celtic accounts, recorded centuries later by Christian monks who interviewed descendants, describe something far more brutal. Royal daughters were assessed by Roman officials. Their value was determined by age, beauty, royal lineage, and potential political usefulness. They were then categorized. Category 1. Political hostages. These were daughters of chiefs who had shown willingness to negotiate. They would be taken to Roman provincial capitals, placed in households of Roman officials, and educated in Roman ways. This sounds benign until you understand what Roman education meant for conquered royal daughters. Category 2. Military rewards. Daughters of chiefs who had resisted were distributed to centurions and military officers as campaign bonuses. Roman military records from this period show line items. Captive A regales distributed per standard protocols. Category 3. provincial allocation. Younger daughters or those deemed less politically valuable were sent to Roman settlements across the empire. To Gaul, to Hispania, to Africa. They would never see Britain again. This was not random cruelty. This was policy. Roman military manuals, the Epitomerai Militaris, compiled later but based on earlier practices, explicitly discuss the strategic value of controlling royal bloodlines in conquered territories. The section on pacification of tribal regions recommends removal and Roman integration of royal females of childbearing age. Think about the precision of that language. Removal. Integration. These are administrative terms for destroying a bloodline. Now let me show you what this looked like when it reached Cartimandua's village. May 13th, 51 Anno Domini. 3 days before the fortress falls. Cartimandua watches from the walls as Roman soldiers erect something in the valley below. At first, she does not understand what she is seeing. Wooden posts, hundreds of them, arranged in perfect rows. Her father Venusius stands beside her. His hand grips the stone wall so tightly his knuckles are white. "They are showing us what happens if we do not surrender," he says quietly. The posts are not empty. Cartimandua realizes she is looking at people. Women. Children. Impaled. Still alive. Some have been there for days based on their condition. These are prisoners from the Disingli tribe, the ones who had resisted 6 months earlier. Roman soldiers tend to the posts like gardeners tending crops. They adjust heights. They provide just enough water to keep prisoners conscious. They have turned dying into a maintained exhibition. This is what you need to understand. The Romans did not do this in Region. They did it in daylight, with organization, with record-keeping. Tacitus records that Scapula's strategy was demonstratio terroris, the demonstration of terror. Make surrender seem like mercy. That night, Venusius calls a council. Cartimandua is not supposed to attend. She is a child. But Celtic custom allows royal children to observe. She sits in the shadows and listens as her father makes the decision that will destroy her life. "We cannot win," Venusius says, "but we can negotiate terms." The terms: the Brigantes will submit to Roman authority. Venusius will remain as client king. Warriors will disarm. Tribute will be paid. In exchange, no massacre. The village will be spared. Families will remain intact. Cartimandua watches her father believe the Romans will honor these terms. Here is what most people do not understand about Roman conquest. The Romans were brilliant administrators. They kept detailed records. They honored contracts when it suited them. But there was always fine print. May 16th, 51 of the Common Era. Dawn, the gates open. Roman soldiers enter in formation. Cartimandua stands with her family in the central courtyard. Around her, 300 villagers kneel as Venusius formally submits. A Roman official, a tribunus named Marcus Ostorius Durio, recorded by name in military correspondence now held in the British Museum, reads the terms of surrender in Latin. A translator repeats them in Celtic. Everything matches what was negotiated. No massacre. Venusius remains chief. Tribute terms are reasonable. Then Durio adds a final clause. His voice does not change tone. He might be reading grain inventory. Per standard protocols of territorial integration, all royal offspring ages 8 to 16 will relocate to Roman administrative centers for education in Roman law, language, and custom. This is non-negotiable. It ensures peaceful transition and benefits the children through access to Roman civilization. The translator stumbles over the words. Around the courtyard, murmurs begin. Venusius stands. "This was not part of our agreement." Durio looks at him with what Tacitus later described as patience one shows a child learning mathematics. "This is standard protocol. Your children are not being harmed. They are being educated. Would you deny them the benefits of Roman learning? Think about the language. Benefits, education, civilization. This is how systematic destruction gets packaged as opportunity. Venutius looks at his children, Cartimandua, her 2 brothers, her 4-year-old sister Lucia. All 4 meet the age criteria. For how long? Venutius asks. Until they are sufficiently integrated to return as productive members of Roman Britain. Which means never. Venutius reaches for his sword. He does not have one anymore. All weapons were surrendered during the negotiation. Dorio gestures. 100 Roman soldiers step forward. Shields lock. Swords remain sheathed. But the message is clear. The children will be collected within the hour, Dorio says. Prepare them for travel. That hour is what haunts me about this story. Cartimandua's mother, Aeliana, takes her to their family quarters. She helps her daughter change into travel clothes. She packs a small bag, a blanket, a comb, a wooden figure Cartimandua's father carved for her when she was 5. Aeliana's hands shake as she braids Cartimandua's hair. The traditional Celtic style, intricate knots that identify tribe and family. Aeliana takes her time, making each loop perfect. This is the last time she will touch her daughter's hair. Remember who you are, Aeliana whispers. Remember your name. Remember Eus. Celtic mothers in conquered territories developed specific rituals for this moment. Archaeological evidence from other conquest sites shows identical preparation patterns. They would whisper family histories, recite genealogies, embed identity in the child's mind, because they knew the Romans would try to erase it. Cartimandua is 12 years old. She does not fully understand what is happening. She thinks this is temporary. She thinks she will be back. Her mother knows better. When the Roman soldiers come to collect the children, Aeliana walks Cartimandua to the courtyard herself. She does not cry, not in front of the Romans. Celtic culture considered emotional displays in front of enemies to be shameful. But when she kisses her daughter's forehead, Cartimandua feels her mother's tears. 4 children are taken from Venutius's household. Across the village, 23 more royal and noble children are collected, ages 8 to 16, all from families with political importance. They are lined up in the courtyard. Roman soldiers bind their hands not tightly, not cruelly, just enough to prevent running. Cartimandua looks back once as they are led through the gates. Her parents stand in the courtyard. Her father's face is stone. Her mother's hand covers her pregnant belly. Cartimandua does not know this is the last time she will ever see them. The march to the Roman administrative center at Diva Victrix, modern Chester, took 9 days. 27 children walking in a column, surrounded by Roman soldiers. Let me describe what this journey was like. Roman military procedure for transporting provincial acquisitions, the bureaucratic term for conquered children, was documented in requisition orders. Children walked during daylight. They were fed twice daily, bread, water, occasionally dried meat. They slept in military tents under guard. This sounds almost humane until you understand the psychological component. The children were not abused during transport. They were ignored. Roman soldiers treated them like cargo, valuable cargo that needed to arrive in good condition, but cargo nonetheless. No one spoke to them except to give basic instructions. No comfort, no explanation, no acknowledgement of their terror. Several children were siblings. The Romans deliberately separated them during the march. Brothers and sisters could see each other, but were not allowed to speak or sit together. Why? Because isolated children are easier to break. Social bonds give psychological resilience. Remove the bonds, speed the process of breaking identity. By day 3, the youngest children, ages 8 and 9, stopped crying. Not because they felt better, because they learned crying brought no response. Cartimandua watched a 9-year-old boy named Brennus, son of a minor noble, go completely silent on day 4. He would walk. He would eat when food was given, but he stopped speaking entirely. His eyes went flat. Later, Roman psychological theory documented in texts like Celsus's De Medicina recognized this state as trauma mutismus. The Romans had a clinical term for the condition they were deliberately creating in children: On day 7, they crested a hill. Below them, Cartimandua saw Diva Victrix. It was not a city, Victrix. It was a machine. Perfect rectangular walls, streets in geometric grids, buildings arranged with mathematical precision, everything designed to demonstrate that chaos had been replaced with order. Celtic villages grew organically, houses clustered around natural features, paths following the land. Roman settlements imposed geometry on nature. The architecture itself was a message. Your way is disorder. Our way is civilization. Think about what this does to a 12-year-old child who has just been torn from everything she knows. You are being told that your entire world, your culture, your family, your identity is primitive chaos that needs correction. They entered through the northern gate. Citizens stopped to watch. 27 Celtic children in tribal clothing, wrists bound, walking through Roman streets. No one looked sympathetic. This was normal. The Romans had been doing this for 800 years across 3 continents. The children were taken to a building in the eastern sector. A large structure with multiple rooms. Later records refer to it as the Provincial Integration Center. Modern archaeological excavations of the site found something interesting. The building had small individual cells. Each cell contained a bed, a chamber pot, and nothing else. No windows, no decorations, no personal items. The cells were not punishment. They were part of the process. Here is what happened when Cartimandua arrived, reconstructed from multiple sources, including later testimony and administrative records. Children were separated by age and gender. Cartimandua was placed in a wing with girls ages 10 to 14. Her brothers, ages 9 and 7, went to a different section. Her 4-year-old sister, Lucia, was taken to a separate building entirely. Celtic siblings fought to stay together. They screamed. They begged in Celtic. The Romans ignored them completely. Cartimandua was placed in cell number 14. The door closed. She heard a lock turn. For the first time since leaving her village 9 days earlier, she was alone. Completely alone. No siblings. No familiar faces. Nothing but stone walls and silence. She sat on the bed and waited for someone to explain what would happen next. No one came for 3 days. This is a specific technique. It is called environmental shock in modern psychological terminology. The Romans did not have that term, but they understood the principle. Take a child from a communal Celtic village where they are never alone, where every moment is filled with family and community. Place them in total isolation, no explanation, no comfort, no contact. The goal is not punishment. The goal is erasure of previous identity to prepare for new conditioning. Food was delivered twice daily. A slot in the door would open. Bread and water would be pushed through. The slot would close. No face, no voice, no human contact. Cartimandua could hear other children in nearby cells crying, calling out, begging in Celtic for someone to answer. The Romans never responded. On the 3rd day, the process began. A Roman woman later identified in records as a magistra puellarum, a teacher of girls, entered Cartimandua's cell. She spoke in Latin, clear and slow, using simple words. Your name is now Cartimanda. You will learn to speak Latin. You will learn Roman customs. You will forget Celtic superstitions. This is for your benefit. Cartimandua responded in Celtic, asking where her brothers and sister were. The magistra did not acknowledge the question. She continued in Latin. Repeat after me. My name is Cartimanda. Cartimandua refused. She demanded in Celtic to see her family. The magistra left. The door locked. No food came that evening. This is the beginning of systematic conditioning documented in multiple Roman contexts. Compliance brings small rewards, food, brief time outside the cell, and eventually contact with other children. Resistance brings nothing, not punishment, just absence. Children's brains are wired to seek patterns and rewards. This system exploits that wiring. By day 5, Cartimandua was repeating basic Latin phrases to get food, not because she accepted the Romans, but because she was 12 years old and hungry. By day 7, she was sitting through daily Latin lessons. learning Roman numerals, Roman history, and Roman gods. The content was not just language instruction, it was replacement ideology. Celtic culture taught that royal daughters were sacred, carriers of bloodlines, connected to the land through spiritual inheritance. Roman instruction taught that Celtic beliefs were primitive superstitions, and that Roman civilization was bringing enlightenment to barbaric peoples. That Cartimandua should be grateful for the opportunity to become civilized. Repeat these messages daily to a child for months. Eventually, confusion sets in. Maybe the Romans are right. Maybe my culture was primitive. Maybe this is better. This is how you break identity without violence. But here is where the machine had multiple tracks. Not all royal daughters received the same processing. After 30 days of initial education, the children were assessed. Roman administrators evaluated their integration progress. Those who showed aptitude and proper attitude would be placed in Roman households as wards. They would be raised Roman, eventually married to Roman citizens or Romanized Celts. Their royal bloodlines would be absorbed into Roman Britain. Those who resisted, who maintained Celtic identity, who refused to cooperate, who caused integration difficulties, were categorized differently. Cartimandua was evaluated on day 31. The assessor was Durio, the same tribunus who had taken her from her village. He sat across from her in an administrative office. A scribe recorded the assessment. Durio spoke in Latin. Cartimandua understood enough by now. "Have you learned the benefits of Roman civilization?" Durio asked. Cartimandua, who was intelligent and had learned over 30 days exactly what the Romans wanted to hear, said yes. "Do you wish to return to primitive Celtic life? Or continue your Roman education?" Think about this question. He is asking a 12-year-old who has been isolated, conditioned, and terrified for 31 days to make a choice about her entire future. Cartimandua said she wished to continue her education. Durio nodded. The scribe made a note. Cartimandua thought she had passed some kind of test. She had not understood the real question. "You will be assigned to a household in Iberacum," Durio said. "A Roman official named Quintus Valerius Corvus requires a ward. You will serve his household and continue education appropriate to your station." "Will the first see my brothers and sister?" Cartimandua asked in careful Latin. "That is not relevant to your placement," Durio said. Cartimandua never saw her siblings again. Later records suggest her brothers were placed in different households. Her 4-year-old sister Lucia was sent to a family in Gaul. The Roman system deliberately scattered Celtic siblings across the empire, preventing reunification. This prevented the possibility that they might reconstruct their Celtic identity together. 3 days later, Cartimandua was transferred to Iberacum, modern York, a 6-day journey. This time, not walking in a column, but riding in a wagon with other successfully integrated Celtic girls. The wagon was an upgrade. The girls were allowed to speak to each other. They spoke in whispered Celtic when the Roman guards were not listening, sharing information, where they were from, what had happened to them, whether anyone had heard news from their families. One girl, a 13-year-old named Briga, had been in Roman custody for 9 months. She had been through 2 household placements already. "Don't trust them when they smile," Briga whispered. "The kind ones are worse. They make you forget what was taken. Then one day, you realize you can barely remember your mother's face, and you don't know if you're Celtic or Roman anymore." Cartimandua asked what happened in the households. Briga looked at her with eyes that seemed much older than 13. "You'll learn," she said. The household of Quintus Valerius Corvus was in the civilian sector of Iberacum. A large villa, Roman architecture, painted walls, mosaic floors. Corvus was a senior administrative official, wealthy, connected, respected. He had a wife, Pomponia, 2 daughters, ages 8 and 11, 1 son, age 15. Cartimandua was brought to the villa in late July, in the year of our Lord 51. She had been in Roman custody for 71 days. Pomponia received her in the atrium. Cartimandua stood in travel-stained clothes, while this Roman woman examined her like one examines a horse at market. "She is older than I requested," Pomponia said to the official who had delivered Cartimandua. I wanted a younger girl, more malleable. This one shows significant aptitude. The official responded. Assessment scores were high. She will be useful. Useful. That word again. Pomponia circled Cartimandua, lifted her chin to examine her face, and checked her hands. She is pretty enough. Celtic features, but not too barbaric. She can work with my daughters, teach them to appreciate the benefits they have as Romans. Think about that. Cartimandua would be placed with Roman daughters her age, a living lesson in what happens to girls who are not born Roman. What is your name? Pomponia asked in Latin. Cartimanda, Cartimandua said, using the Romanized version she had been taught. Wrong, Pomponia said. Your name is Julia. Roman households have Roman names. You are Julia now. Repeat it. Julia, Cartimandua said. Her Celtic name, Cartimandua, meaning sleek pony, was erased, replaced with the most common Roman female name. One Julia among thousands. This was deliberate. The Romans understood that names carry identity. Erase the name, erase another piece of the person. Cartimandua, now Julia, was assigned duties in the household. She would assist with the daughter's education, help with household weaving and textile work, attend family meals, and participate in household religious rituals. On the surface, this looks almost benign. She is being treated like an adopted daughter, not a slave. But here is what this actually meant. Every morning, Julia would attend household prayers to Roman gods. She would watch the family honor Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva, the gods who represented the civilization that had conquered her people. If she showed reluctance, Pomponia would correct her gently. You are not a barbarian anymore, Julia. This is civilization. Be grateful, grateful. That word poisoned everything. During lessons with the Roman daughters, the tutor would discuss history. Roman expansion would be described as bringing civilization to savage peoples. The conquest of the Brigantes, Julia's people, would be presented as Rome liberating Britannia from tribal chaos. Julia would sit there, listening to her own destruction being taught as progress. The Roman daughters would sometimes ask her what life was like before civilization. They were curious, not cruel. They genuinely believed they were superior and that Julia should be grateful for rescue. Did you live in mud huts? The 11-year-old asked once. We had timber homes, Julia began in Celtic, then caught herself and switched to Latin. We had proper houses, but no baths, no roads, no law? How could you stand it? How do you explain to a Roman child that your people had law, culture, medicine, art, spirituality? That civilization looked different, but was not absent. Julia learned not to try. She learned to smile and agree that Roman ways were better. This is how systematic cultural erasure works, not through violence, through making the victim complicit in their own erasure. At night, Julia slept in a small room off the kitchen, alone. In the dark, she would whisper to herself in Celtic, reciting the family genealogy her mother had taught her, counting in Celtic, praying to Celtic gods whose names she was forgetting. She was terrified that one morning she would wake up and not remember the Celtic words anymore. 4 months into her placement, something happened that broke another piece of her. A messenger arrived from Deva Victrix. Letters and news from the provincial capital. Corvus received a dispatch and mentioned at dinner that there had been an incident in the Brigantes territory. Julia, sitting silently at the edge of the dining room, attending the family as she was required to do, heard every word. Venutius, her father, had attempted to rebel against Roman authority. He had gathered warriors from neighboring tribes. The rebellion had lasted 3 days before Roman forces crushed it. Venutius had been executed, publicly. As a warning, Julia's mother, Aeliana, had died during the suppression. Whether in combat or by suicide, the report did not specify. Corvus discussed this news over wine like one discusses the weathering. These tribal chiefs never learn, he said. You give them client status. You treat them with dignity. And still they rebel. It is their nature, barbaric. Julia sat on her bench against the wall, her hands folded in her lap, her face blank. Inside, she was screaming. Both of her parents were dead. The rebellion meant her village had likely been destroyed. Her extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, probably dead or scattered. She wanted to scream, to throw something, to attack Corvus for discussing her parents' deaths like it was meaningless. She did nothing. She sat perfectly still. Because 71 days of Roman conditioning plus 4 months in a Roman household had taught her that emotional display would bring nothing but punishment. That night, alone in her small room, Julia cried silently into her blanket. She whispered her parents' names in Celtic. She tried to remember her mother's face. The details were already fading. She realized with horror that she was forgetting what her mother looked like. This is the moment when something broke inside her that never fully healed. For the next 2 years, Julia existed in the Corvus household. She performed her duties. She spoke Latin fluently now, better than Celtic eyes. She participated in Roman religious rituals without resistance. She smiled when expected. She expressed gratitude when required. The Romans thought she was successfully integrated. Inside, Julia had learned something that would define the rest of her life. Survival meant erasure. To live, she had to kill Cartimandua and become Julia. By age 14, she barely remembered Celtic. By 15, she thought in Latin. By 16, when she looked at Celtic prisoners being brought through a barracum, she felt nothing. They were strangers, barbarians, just like the Romans said. The machine had worked. In 47 Anno Domini, Julia was married to a Romanized Celtic man, a minor official who had collaborated with Rome during the conquest. His family had been rewarded with Roman citizenship. He was Celtic by blood, Roman by identity, just like her. They had 3 children, all raised Roman, all taught that their Celtic heritage was something to be ashamed of, something primitive that Rome had civilized. Julia lived to age 44. She died in 75 of the Common Era in a villa in Lindum, modern Lincoln, surrounded by her Roman British family. Speaking Latin, worshipping Roman gods. She had not spoken Celtic in 20 years, could not remember her mother's face, could barely remember her Celtic name. The records that document her existence, tax records, marriage contracts, household inventories, list her as Julia, ward of the House of Corvus, Celtic origin, successfully Romanized, as if that was something to celebrate. Here is what haunts me about her story. Julia did not die in that cell in Diva Victrix. She did not die during the march. She did not die in the Corvus household. She died in pieces, little erasures, day by day. Name, language, memory, family, identity, until nothing of Cartimandua remained except a genetic trace in her descendants' blood. This is what Roman conquest looked like for royal daughters. Not dramatic death, systematic erasure. And here is the thing that should keep you awake at night. This was not unique to Cartimandua. This was policy. Roman military procedures for provincial integration of royal females were applied across the empire for 800 years. Britannia, Gaul, Germania, Hispania, Africa, Judea. Thousands of royal daughters, all processed through the same machine. How many Cartimanduas were there? How many girls lost their names, their families, their identities? How many lived to old age having forgotten who they were? We do not know. Because the Romans were efficient record keepers for administrative purposes, but they did not track cultural erasure. Why would they? To them, this was civilization. This was progress. The archaeological evidence is scattered but consistent. In every Roman provincial capital, we find the same infrastructure: integration centers, small cells, administrative buildings, evidence of systematic processing of conquered populations. We find children's items in these locations, small toys, Celtic jewelry buried in foundation deposits, hidden, forgotten. We find graffiti in cells, Celtic names scratched into stone, girls trying to remember who they were. We find mass graves near integration centers. Not all children survived the process. Some died from disease. Some from despair. Some took their own lives. The Romans recorded these deaths in administrative documents with clinical efficiency. Provincial acquisition. Deceased during integration. Cause. Refusal of sustenance. That is bureaucratic language for a child starving themselves to death. Here is the question nobody asks. What happened to Cartimandua's siblings? Her brothers, ages 9 and 7 when taken, disappear from records entirely. Most likely, they were placed in military households, trained to serve Rome, died before adulthood, or lived anonymous lives. Her 4-year-old sister Lucia was sent to Gaul. I found one possible reference in later records. A woman named Lucia, married to a Roman merchant in Lugdunum, described as of British origin. If that is her, she lived to age 52. She probably did not remember Britain at all. She was too young when taken. The systematic nature of this process is what makes it so disturbing. This was not passionate violence. This was not rage-fueled revenge. This was administrative efficiency applied to the destruction of identity. Roman officials conducting assessments, scribes recording integration progress, magistrate teaching Latin and Roman values, household placements arranged like business transactions. The machine did not hate Celtic children. It did not feel anything about them. They were inputs in a process. Outputs were Romanized citizens. The system worked, except for the humans destroyed in the process. Think about Cartimandua's mother Aeliana in that courtyard, braiding her daughter's hair one last time, whispering, "Remember who you are." Cartimandua did not remember. The Romans made sure of it. That is the genius of the machine. It convinced its victims that their own erasure was civilization, progress, opportunity. Cartimandua Julia probably believed she was lucky. Lucky to have been taken from that primitive village. Lucky to have received a proper Roman education. Lucky to have married well and lived comfortably. She had been conditioned to interpret her own cultural genocide as salvation. This is what conquest looked like in the Roman Empire. Not just military victory, systematic erasure of identity across generations, turning conquered royal daughters into Romans who taught their own children to despise Celtic heritage. By the time Julia died in 75 Anno Domini, the Brigantes tribe had been completely absorbed into Roman Britain. Their royal line had been scattered, Romanized, erased. No rebellion was possible because there was no distinct identity left to rebel with. The machine worked. It worked so well that 2,000 years later, most people have never heard of Cartimandua. They have heard of Boudica, the Celtic queen who rebelled dramatically and died fighting. That story is remembered because it is heroic. It is dramatic. It fits a narrative. But Cartimandua's story, that is erased because it is not heroic. It is just sad. It is disturbing. It reveals how conquest actually worked, not through battlefield glory, but through systematic processing of children. The Romans knew that future generations would not celebrate the integration centers. They would not build monuments to the magistrate who broke Celtic girls and remade them as Romans. They would not honor the administrative efficiency of cultural erasure. So they did not talk about it much in the histories. They recorded it in administrative documents, requisition orders, tax records, placement assignments, the bureaucratic paper trail of genocide. And 2,000 years later, archaeologists dig through those documents and realize what they are looking at. Here is what we are left with. Somewhere in northern England there is a hill fort. Mostly ruins now, grass-covered earthworks, stone foundations. That is where Cartimandua lived for the first 12 years of her life, where she played, where she learned to weave, where her mother braided her hair for the last time. Somewhere beneath the city of York, there are foundations of a Roman villa, the house where Julia lived, where she forgot who she was, where she became the person Rome wanted her to be. These two places are only 100 miles apart. But the distance between Cartimandua and Julia is infinite. The girl who was taken from that hill fort never made it to that villa. She died somewhere on the journey, not physically, but completely. If this exposed something about Roman conquest that history classes never taught, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We are uncovering more accounts of what empire actually looked like. Not the glory in the history books, but the documented destruction of human beings that made that glory possible. Drop a comment with your thoughts. Did you know this is what Roman civilization looked like for conquered peoples? Let us keep this history alive. The question is not whether Rome was a great empire. It was military genius, engineering marvels, legal innovations, cultural achievements. All true. The question is, what did that greatness cost? And who paid? Cartimandua paid, with her name, her family, her identity, her entire existence as a Celtic person. She is not the only one. She is just the one whose story we can reconstruct from scattered records. How many other royal daughters disappeared into the Roman machine? How many Julias are buried in unmarked graves across the former empire? How many descendants have no idea their great-great-grandmothers were Celtic princesses who were systematically erased? We do not know. The Romans did not think it was worth tracking. After all, they were just barbarian children being civilized. Why would anyone remember their names? Cartimandua's mother asked her daughter to remember who she was, to remember her name, to remember her family. She did not. She could not. The machine was too efficient. But now, 2,000 years later, we can speak her name again. Cartimandua, daughter of Venutius and Aeliana, royal daughter of the Brigantes, aged 12 when Rome took her, aged 44 when she died, having forgotten who she had been. Her story is finally being told. Not the sanitized version where Roman education was opportunity. The true version where Roman conquest meant systematic destruction of identity. Remember Hera. Remember all the royal daughters whose names were erased. Remember what civilization actually meant for conquered peoples. Because the Romans wrote the histories, but the victims left evidence. In stone, in hidden jewelry, in whispered stories passed down through generations. Until someone finally wrote them down. The machine tried to erase them. It failed. We remember. That is what history is. Not just the glory, but the cost, the names, the children, the mothers who braided hair one last time. We remember Cartimandua, and in remembering, we reclaim what Rome tried to erase. Her name was Cartimandua. She was 12 years old. She was a royal daughter of the Brigantes. She was real. She mattered. Her story is true. And now you know what really happened to royal daughters in Roman invasions. Not battlefield death. Systematic erasure. Administrative efficiency applied to the destruction of identity. This is the documented account. Historians spent 2,000 years trying to forget. This is what civilization looked like for the conquered. This is the true cost of empire. Remember her name.